In my opinion, I think that Ondo, not too long ago, recently announced something that could be considered, at least to me, as good news, hypothetically. Even though nothing I say is financial advice, what is that? Not too long ago, Ondo, they made a post on X and it said that BNB chain is on. Now, BNB chain is very massive, by the way, but let me get a little bit more into the details when it comes to this, because allegedly, through this post, it does state that BNB Chain, one of the most widely used blockchain networks, which is arguably, I think, maybe the case, but even besides that, it will soon support Ondo's suite of tokenized assets, including over 100 US stocks, ETFs, and funds to start. Ondo, I like what they're doing. I like the direction in which it's heading because it's focused on something called real world assets, RWAs, right? Why do I think it's cool or interesting? It's because RWA tokens, for instance, they're digital representations of physical assets on the blockchain. For instance, market sectors could include, like, real estate, art, bonds, stocks. There's a bunch of possibilities, allegedly. So I think this kind of fits into the narrative as to what Ondo is kind of trying to do moving forward. And Ondo, sometimes people like to say, oh man, $20 and all this. Sometimes people want me to talk about a different scenario. So I'm going to talk about $10 hypothetically. Again, even though nothing I say is financial advice. Now, let's say Ondo went to the price of $10. It's around a 10x from here. Market cap, considering current circulating supply at that point, would be around $31.5 billion. Now I get it. Some people might be thinking, whoa, 10x, what is this all about? Well, the way you take a look at it is this. Where some people might consider it not good for whatever reason, the way I view this is that what is something like Bitcoin and Ethereum going to do in the next 6 to 10 months? You know what I mean? I mean, here's the thing. Bitcoin going to 300 grand is slightly under 3x from here. Ethereum going to 10 grand is around a 3x from here. I mean, the way you take a look at it is that, is it likely for Bitcoin or Ethereum to do a 10x in the next 6 to 10 months? I don't know about that. I wouldn't believe that. I wouldn't feel too confident having that type of mindset, in my opinion, because they're already pretty massive as of right now. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, Ondo is not a small project by any means. It's actually kind of massive in the grand scheme of things, but it's not like that massive. Also, on top of that, Ondo is like focused on a market sector, I think, which is still kind of on the rise because I think back then people didn't really care about real world assets. But as of right now, I think it is pretty interesting. I think it is a pretty big narrative. I would arguably say that Ondo is like one of the premier ones that I think about when I think about RWAs. So I just find it a good narrative. I think RWAs, now, who knows what, Ondo will do if we ever see a fully fledged type of altcoin season. But take a look at not too long ago what Ondo did, when the market was doing okay, I would say. Like, it wasn't even a fully fledged type of altcoin season, in my opinion. And Ondo did that. So $10, that wouldn't surprise me, even though only time will tell. Now, around a $31.5 billion market cap. I mean, Dogecoin exceeded this by pretty much like around 50 billion back in 2021 in terms of market cap. Now, it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison because, of course, Ondo is not a meme coin, but then I think it kind of showcases that even Dogecoin was able to achieve that years ago. And keep in mind, at that point, right, around that time, in the peak of the 2021 bull run, around 300 million crypto owners, which actually sounded very impressive at that moment in time. But now we have over allegedly 600 million. So just imagine that. That's like basically double. And also on top of that, take a look at the enterprise adoption that we're seeing as of right now. Take a look at the narrative when it comes to RWAs. The way I view it is that when it comes to Ondo, it doesn't seem like a bad project to me, at least in my mindset. But even besides all that, I'm just going to stay patient because, quite frankly, that is the only thing I can control. And in the meantime, though, I can at least take a look at the present, which I am. I'm taking a look at the updates when it comes to Ondo, but then I also can take a look at the past. And historically, typically, altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they usually peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. So basically, around a year and a half. Now, we add a year and a half from the last Bitcoin halving event, which happened, last year in April. Again, we had 18 months on top of that, around October this year. We're not in October yet. I get it. We might be a little bit close because, next month is going to be August. We're already in July as of right now, but I'm just saying. There's no telling if it's going to kind of repeat itself this time around because, each cycle is going to be different. There's going to be different scenarios. There's going to be different things going on. I'm totally aware of that. But with the way things are heading as of right now, you know, it wouldn't surprise me maybe near the end of this year. But again, who knows? Only time will tell. And keep in mind, I get it. Ethereum, Bitcoin as of right now is doing very good. But what happens if that Bitcoin dominance drops and we maybe see a fully fledged type of altcoin season? Again, if Ondo was able to do that before without really much of a major catalyst, I would say, imagine what it could do if we did ever see sort of like a 2021 version type of altcoin season, but let's say this time around with more crypto owners. This is just my mindset. Now, I am not telling anyone to do anything when it comes to Ondo. I can only speak on my behalf, but the way I take a look at it is that I like it nonetheless because it does have a good and proven community. I think the community is very passionate, not to mention good exchange listings, and I think fundamentals are good in theory when it comes to Ondo, at least in my mind. Now, let's also take this into consideration. Why do I think having a good community matters? It's because I think that without really a good community, when it comes to a lot of these projects, they are not really able to kind of make it through, times in which, let's say, there's a bear market and where things aren't doing necessarily the best. Not in terms of fundamentals, because that's a different case, but in terms of popularity, in terms of attention, take a look at how Ondo, in terms of that, is still holding up pretty good in the grand scheme of things. And what I like about it is that it kind of has the passion of a meme coin project in terms of the community, but then it's not a meme coin. So then I kind of view it as like a best of both worlds type of scenario. Ondo is more so a utility driven project. Other meme coins out there, they have the passion, they have the fans, but sometimes, of course, naturally, because they are meme coins, they don't necessarily have the best use case out there. So when I take a look at something like Ondo, which kind of basically has aspects of that, and then it has good fundamentals, again, that is something that I'm a fan of. Now, keep in mind, right? When it comes to the Ondo chain, which I get it, some people like to say, man, who cares about this? Well, I actually do care because, for instance, the Ondo chain is allegedly purpose-built for institutional-grade RWAs, again, real-world assets, and I already talked about that earlier in the video. So I think overall, really, Ondo, I think, is, very interesting to me. And keep in mind as well, Ondo is also focused on the payments market, the global trade and finance market. So it's a little bit similar in a sense in terms of what the market is focused on when compared to Ripple and Stellar. So I find that very unique. And keep in mind, right, the payments market is currently valued at over $2 trillion, and the global trade and finance market is predicted to reach up to $5 trillion in value by 2028. So overall, I just think that Ondo, I think it kind of ticks the boxes as to what I'm looking for. Market cap isn't too massive, it's not too small either. I think it's somewhat a good balance in between. I do like that. Shows a little bit, maybe, I would arguably say in my mind, more stability than like, a micro cap, right? This is just kind of my thought process, not to mention I do like the fundamentals. I like the exchange listings. That's what I look for when it comes to these utility different projects. And I'm a fan of Ondo. And that's pretty much it. I'm just going to stay patient. And seeing, again, news like that when it comes to the regard of BNB chain, or should I say the BNB chain, I do like that. I find it exciting. But in the meantime, I'm just going to stay patient, hold, and that's pretty much it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I would greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.